And we're good.
Cool.
In case anything happens to either copy.
Yeah, awesome.
And question: did I cover Saturnian cosmology last time? Can I give a
we did. That was what we did. Yeah, we did Origin of Earth.
I want to cover that again if we already did. We got a lot of other stuff to talk about.
The only thing I had a question about that, which I'll bring up later on, was I wanted to try and wrap my head around a little bit more the black cube stuff with the Saturnian cosmology, because I was trying to explain it to someone, and I'm like, I drew a blank. I need to ask Ari this because I can't remember what it was about.
Sure, yeah.
Now I want to allow you to share the screen and stuff too, so you can scroll through, because you've got a lot of imagery and all that stuff on your website here, which I'll be sort of scrolling through too. But it's probably best if you scroll through with it while you're talking about it. Is that cool?
You bet. No problem.
Awesome. Let me just close this chat here. All right. Is that allowing you to share the screen?
Yeah, I should be able to do that by hitting this. And I'm gonna try this. When we do it now or later, I can just stop it for now. Is that looking all right?
Yeah, that looks good.
It's really wide resolution.
That's fine. I'm happy with
that. I zoomed it
in.
in. So, all right, stop.
All right, cool. All right, well, we'll just grab my notes here. How's your day been, man? You been all right?
Yeah, pretty good. We're getting ready to move from one temp location to another, and then after that, we're gonna probably go to Georgia. So sometime in the summer.
How come you move? Is this like a lifestyle change thing? Or
I might not have mentioned it, but our house burned down in September.
What?
Yeah. No. I did email people, but I might not have emailed everyone.
That's all right. I didn't expect you to tell me, but that's
it's just been very disorganized since then. Getting reconnected and all their stuff back. But we're totally I'm back on track now. I got all our stuff. Job's still intact and everything.
Wow. Oh man. Obviously no injuries, no one lost lives or just property, I'm guessing.
No permanent injuries. We did lose some animals, some pets, kind of sad. But we did the rest survived. And the insurance covered most of it, but they apparently didn't cover enough to rebuild the house. We didn't know that was possible. So if you check your insurance policy, make sure it's like extended or enhanced or whatever it takes to cover the full cost in the case of inflation and all that kind of stuff. So
yeah, right. Okay.
We decided to just move instead of rebuild, which is a lot more, makes more sense.
Fair enough. It's probably cheaper in Georgia anyway, I'm guessing.
Yes, it is. Arizona got a little bit crazy politically and every other way recently.
Yeah. All right. Well, I might just start recording, then we can just continue this little chat as well.
Yeah,
before we dive into it. Okay, so it's recording now. All righty, folks. Thanks for joining us for the General Knowledge podcast. We're going to show number 31 with Ari Asulin back again to join me to go over some of his amazing and interesting work over at paradigmthreat.net. Make sure you check it out as well. Of course, this video is going to be great for the members. You're going to be able to see this time, because last time we just had him on the audio, and I was trying to throw up things and links and stuff as well for the members. But this time, we're going to be able to scroll through and see exactly what Ari's talking about over at his website there, and all the information we're going to cover today. Some interesting topics, but before we get into all that, I'll just say good day to Ari. Ari, thanks for joining me, mate. I appreciate the time and joining me over here in Australia.
Absolutely. Howdy. Appreciate coming on.
Awesome, man. It was quite a while ago when we actually caught up. It was over a year ago, I'm pretty sure. So
it's been a busy year.
Yeah, I've noticed you've been doing plenty of shows too. People are super interested in the content you've been putting together and the journey you've been going on as well with this work, and your little crew that you've got there in your Discord Discord chat there as well.
They've been great.
Excited to delve into some of this work that you guys will be putting together. Actually, I just find it fascinating. Like, I've listened to, like I said just before we started recording, some of these shows you've done with some other podcasters and stuff, and I was just sort of working away listening, and I had to stop sometimes. I'm just sitting there going, with my mouth agape, going, this is just fascinating. I need to get Ari back on to talk about this stuff.
Yeah.
So I'm super excited, man. But yeah, just before we started recording as well, you were telling me you're moving. You're sort of in an intermittent place at the moment. You're going to head over to Georgia from Arizona,
right?
On a bit of a move. Hope that all goes well for you, man. That's coming up in a couple of weeks, isn't it, or something like it's coming?
Yeah, sometime this year we're going to try and move. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, right. And I'm sorry to hear. Yeah, you said you had a fire at home as well. That's
Right.
what a
Yeah. In
shocker, man.
September, just kind of randomly, I think it was started by an electric bike battery, one that we hadn't
Wow.
used in over a year, one that was damaged. And we thought it was just sitting there. Right. But apparently, these things, the cells can corrode and fuse into each other, discharge randomly in the middle of the day, catch on fire. So we know that there was a bike battery below a bed, and it started an enormous fire. And then the fireman found the battery cells scattered under the fire
Wow.
after. So he sort of just that wrote in that as the reason.
And these are lithium ion batteries too, aren't they? Usually those things.
Yeah, and it's from China too. And not saying that China's anything wrong with it, but it's not going to have the best testing. And it's completely new technology. These bike batteries been around for 5-10 years, especially the higher amplitude ones. So yeah, they're. I mean, it's not like a Tesla doesn't have the same problem, right? Keep hearing about Tesla's batteries.
Yeah, I've heard that about some of these cars just like catching fire and they can't even
kill people
out sometimes. Yeah, fascinating stuff. All right, well let's sort of dive straight into it because I think I mentioned before we started recording as well. It's a Saturday here for all the listeners. Beautiful day here in Queensland, Australia, and I'm going to try and get down the beach a little bit later on with the family after a busy as week. Lots of listening to podcasts throughout the week, as I always do, and of course listening to some of your previous work. And the most last time when we talked, we did the fake moon landing stuff. We covered all the moon landing hoax stuff. Then we kind of moved into Earth origin and the Saturnian cosmology a little bit as well. So it was awesome to hear all that sort of stuff. Super fascinating. It blows me away. And that tied into a previous show, which I'd also done with Wal Thornhill as well, when we talked about electric universe and all that sort of stuff, which super into. Like, to me, this explains a lot of what's happening, a lot of the Earth origin, a lot of our own galaxy and solar system origin beginnings as well. Right. To me, that makes sense. That above all this other thing, that's all these other theories and stories we've heard over time.
Cosmologies. Yeah.
Correct. Other cosmologies. This sort of version seems
makes
to
sense.
make the most. It does.
Exactly.
It fits like that puzzle piece that, that one actually does go there,
I keep hearing that. I keep hearing that, comment sections on YouTube from other videos, and not my videos, and they're saying the same thing over and over, first time in my life. This makes sense to me. It's just, that's what everyone says, actually, that gets it.
Yeah, isn't that funny though? Hey, and to me, that rings true then to me that there must be some truth to this, not
some truth to it, right?
At least some, like some of these things, even some of them, obviously, we can't prove without a shadow of a doubt some of these things, and a lot of these things can be, I guess, hypotheses, right. But they seem to be the best explanation for stuff. It's Absolutely. Not like we're sitting there saying like the green movement coming along like this new religion, and saying, climate, the climate change and the Earth's going to be warming, and this tornado happened because of climate change. No, it's not just lumping something in because it fits that narrative.
Right.
This makes sense because of the evidence trail that's been left, with cultures and all that sort of stuff. So,
right.
The next phase of this, what I wanted to talk about today with you, is some of the work you've done recently with regards to Mars, and this sort of stuff kind of blew me away, and it kind of comes out a little bit of left field, so people need to open their minds up a little bit too when they hear this stuff. But Mars has a history as well, and there could very well be a civilization on Mars that is controlling our planet.
Influencing is the word I'd use, because it's complicated and it's back and forth, and it's based on all kinds of different balances.
All right.
It's hard to
let's go with influencing then. Okay.
Right.
And we're going to lead us on a journey on how that sort of works and where it all comes from. And I'll hand it over to you to kind of, I guess, I'll throw in some questions from time to time if you don't mind me interrupting you.
No, not at all. Here, I'll do a little screen share quickly here.
Yeah, let's
so you see that fine?
It's just come up just yet. There we go. It's come up now. All right.
Excellent. Okay, just to recap, in Saturnian cosmology, the lifetime of Earth is very short. It's not billions of years or even millions. It's just thousands. And it's sort of like what the Bible timelines have. Every indigenous religion on Earth has sort of a timeline going back about 7,000 years from today. They say, 5,000 BC, and then about 2000 we're at AD. So that timeline seems to be closer to what I think reality is than the timeline NASA gives us, 4.5 billion years Earth, 13.8, universe.
Yeah.
And so so I covered it last time, and it was a really short timeline, right? So what does that say about modern history after, in the AD time? In modern history, we say that there's 2,000 years since AD, since this ante denomini period, which means after death, and allegedly means the death of Jesus. But people, aren't really sure about the dates there. So what we have, the new emerging theory on this time period, this 2,000 year time period, is that it wasn't 2,000 years. It was much shorter. It was 1,000 years. It was that there's an extra 1,000 years added in there, and that everything in modern human civilization started essentially in the 11th century. Of course, it wasn't called the 11th century until much later when the calendars were set. So I'm jumping around, but let me start at the beginning here. And actually, I don't have many visuals to share on this part, so I'm gonna get out of the visual right away. I'm gonna go back to that. I'm gonna get to the mud flood stuff, which is very interesting later. All right, so after the whole Saturnian cosmology birth of the Earth and other planets in our solar system, after the cataclysms died down, everything became constant. The planets' orbits are constant and predictable. There was no more cataclysms, and human civilization was now able to actually scatter around the planet, build technology that will last, all this kind of stuff. They already had some technology, the stuff they needed to survive cataclysmic time. I might have gotten into cathedrals. How the original purpose of cathedrals was to protect against all that sort of stuff. Right, protect against lightning storms. When the lightning storms are all gone, everyone forgot the meaning of these cathedrals, and the people who actually kept the cathedrals were more or less considered, crazy people. Like, why do you live there and not marry and have no children? That's crazy. So the answer to that was that the people who kept these cathedral religions were simply holding on to the old memories, however they were written down, sculptures, paintings. Paintings. Some there wasn't much text back then. There wasn't much written back then. So a lot of it was oral. Like everyone knows, Judaism was based on oral Torah. And in this time period, people were debating, sort of where we go from here. Religion. What was all that? Was that God pissed at us for 1,000 years, or was it natural? Is this just something that happens natural as a course of the birth of any planet? And so people thought about that, and it turns out that that some people in Turkey, let's say in Istanbul particularly, believed for sure that there was a one creator God of all of this who is mad at us, constantly punishing us, and that we need to worship him. These guys were monotheists, and they were at the time in the 11th century not common at all. What was common, of course, was people having varied stories about the gods, and there being no centralization of opinion on religion because there's no textbooks or anything like that written yet. Dawn of civilization, very early period for civilization. And this question about what happened in the cataclysm times created a religious schism in the center of Europe, which essentially jump-started civilization. Everything we know about warfare and empires and taxation all comes from this moment. So what's this moment? Basically, we know that this character, Jesus, is one of the most influential people in human history. That everyone agrees about that. Even Muslims agree. We know that most historians insist that Jesus was a historic figure. It's not mythical or made up. It's not fiction. This is a person that actually lived, even though we completely disagree about how he lived, when he lived, what the meaning of his life was. But I can tell you right now, it's very clear to me that the only thing that was really significant about this guy was that he represented the first religious schism that ever happened, causing the first war that ever happened. And let me explain how this happened. Now, Jesus was not called that because there was no J in the Cyrillic alphabet of the Eastern of Asia and Eastern Europe. His name was Andronicus Christ, and this is based on the secular or royal version of his story. There is that one. There's also the Jewish version, and there's also a Christian version, apostolic version. So there's many different versions on text that survive till this day. A lot of them survived in the Kremlin and buildings like it, and you can still refer to them today. And you can see that how they changed over history. They told the story this way, and then 300 years later, they changed it up and told it a different way. So in the secular version of the Christ story, the one I believe, Jesus basically represented sort of a Renaissance man of the Rus Horde Empire. This is the Russian Empire, also known as Tataria, which existed from the Kremlin area all the way into Siberia. It's this huge, vast empire. And it hadn't formed yet in the 11th century, but it was about to form as a result of this schism. One thing unique about this location in Russia at the time was that people were generally pretty rich. And in one of the descriptions of Jesus, what Christ, I should call him, he was walking around with diamonds all over the place, and he had jewels on his sandals. And people are pretty impressed. They're like, jewels on sandals? You are really rich, dude. I mean, well, how do you have this money? And so one of the reasons why he had money and came from a rich location is because in this Rus Horde location, they didn't have taxes. They didn't have any kind of usury or central authority, period. It was pretty scattered. And one more thing, a big detail, is that Jesus was a giant. He was a big guy. He was way bigger than the Europeans. In many of the secular versions, he was also hairy, big, hairy guy.
And I've seen a lot, there seems to be a lot of the Tatarian culture. These people were big people too, tall.
Yeah, big people, exactly. They're giants.
8 foot, 7 foot, 9 foot kind of tall people, massive, yeah.
Right. And the only thing that made this particular giant and his brother, we think his brother John the Baptist, special is that they traveled from Rus Horde to Istanbul, to Jerusalem, the center of all religion on earth at the time. Why was it called Jerusalem? Because they'd rebuilt the castle the way that they saw it in heaven originally. Jerusalem was originally up in heaven. It showed this big six-figured, six-pointed star. This pointed star, we know the Star of David. It also is the black cube, which I'm going to get into. And this, in the original depictions of the Jerusalem in the Bible, you can see that there's actually 6 gates in 3 sections. It's actually, so I won't get into all that, but it's very fascinating. But yeah, go ahead, question.
Does that have anything to do with what the ancients would have seen in the sky with this plasma event? Is that what relating to this? If you they're seeing this thing in the sky, thinking this is the kingdom of heaven up there, but they're seeing this star pattern in the sky. Right.
But not just back then. Today, if you go look at the top of Saturn today, you will see this hexagon. Just look it up and you'll see.
I've heard about that.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
And a hexagon is also a cube. Just depends how you look at it. It's either flat hexagon or a 3D cube. These people saw that cube in early times. They might have seen it through telescopes. They might have seen it before we separated from the collinear configuration.
Yeah, when it was closer.
Yeah. And the reason why it was 6-pointed was because it was a collection of intense amplitude discharging, hitting a point, almost like an Independence Day, that kind of thing. So it just happened to take 6 points, 4 points, 8 points, many different shapes. In the golden age, in the perfect time, it had 6 points. And that's when they say, the Jerusalem in heaven. So they tried to rebuild Jerusalem on earth in the 11th century, they being the monotheists, the ones who kept in the cathedrals and believed that they were literally receiving instructions from the one God, creator of the universe.
One, yeah.
Right. And this is where I get into Mars. Because if you look at Saturnian cosmology, Mars was right there. They had a connection with Earth. You can walk between them. They had giants on Mars, all kinds of stuff, and allegedly Atlantis, very advanced people. When that
so you're saying Atlantis was on Mars?
Atlantis represented the most highest place you can go in the collinear configuration. The highest place you can go was above Earth into Mars, and above Mars you saw Venus, and then Saturn and Jupiter and the Sun. But you couldn't stand in those locations.
No wonder they can't find Atlantis on Earth.
Right. There might be ruins in the North Pole of Earth, but the ruins of Atlantis are the North Pole of Mars. Forbidden zone.
Okay. All right. Awesome. Right. Okay.
So that's part of the answer you had earlier. So So Jerusalem was in Istanbul, not yet known as Constantinople, and like I said, center of all religion. Jesus and his brother, they walk into that location and they get trained. They say, "We want to be rabbis." And it all works out, but then they start to question everything that they're taught. And they say, back in our home, we don't really believe in monotheism. We believe in polytheism. And they're just like, you're not allowed to say that. Bottom line is that in the story, for whatever reason, he gets chased out from this Jerusalem location, has to go back to his home location. And then he comes back later in stride. He comes back as the prodigal child with an army, essentially, a whole bunch of believers, other giants, and even small people who have totally taken to his religion against the central authority of Istanbul, of Jerusalem. So the schism that was created by this first story was essentially when Christ comes back and gets crucified. Why does that happen? You just got to look at how it happens. They accused him of saying that he was the king of the Jews. Now, why would he say that? I don't know. I don't think he would ever say that, because he wasn't Jewish. I know a lot of people disagree with me there. That can explain why people think he is later. He he was definitely from the Rusort Empire. He was a barbarian, and sorry, okay, trigger.
Yep, you're right.
And so when he came back, he basically came back with his new religion. He said, look, up there, we got this all set up. We have it all set up. We don't have usury. Everyone owns their own property, and we have republic, and we have democracy. It was the very beginning of all those things. He didn't invent those things, but he was right there at the forefront of those things, spreading them for sure, and debating them among the other rabbis and stuff. So anyway, this talk was extremely threatening. Oh yeah, sorry, I forgot my point. They accused him of being the king of the Jews, which was well beyond what he was claiming. The reason for that was because the Jews were looking for their next Messiah. Their history said that they had been saved many times by a Messiah. The last time it was Venus escaping from Jupiter's mouth, causing the Exodus. Before that, Jupiter intervened. There's a lot of times when the planets intervened, and they said that's the new Messiah, or the prophecy child, or whatever. It was always a deity. It was never a person. But when this person showed up and threatened their entire religion from top to bottom, he became the equivalent of somebody claiming to be the savior in their prophecy. And although I believe he never said it himself, they accused him of it. And it's so dubious I did. They put him on a cross with another person above, saying this other guy is actually a worse criminal, and Jesus is the lower criminal for claiming that, and below him, a thief is not so bad. You know, it's just they're making a point, you know, to everyone. Do not do this. Do not follow this guy. This guy is wrong. Here's one place where I differ with the chronicles that I've read from Yanko, who's studied this stuff in detail. He believes Anatoly Fomenko. He believes, as most people do, that Jesus was killed on the cross. But actually, looking at the story closely, there's so many reasons to believe he was not. The first reason is that Istanbul was not trying to start a war with the giants. That would have been devastating. That location that they had was actually set up as a massive rampart on the Bosphorus River. It was almost impregnable. So they were actually looking to protect themselves against giants back then. And they would not want to instigate a giant sort of crusade against them. So that they crucified him, I don't believe that they killed him. You can see in the paintings, his own family takes him off the cross. And then later he's seen throughout India, the location of Hindustan, which was later renamed to India. He's seen as far as Japan, and he's seen in America. Now, a lot of people say, oh, that was, you know, he came back to life. You know, no, okay. I don't believe in magic at all. I'm looking at this from the secular point of view, and there is one. And he absolutely did travel in these regions after his crucifixion. This is a time when people didn't mutilate each other very, very often, and killing somebody on the cross wouldn't have made sense. But anyway, here's the problem. Since they did the crucifixion, they're trying to scare everyone away from the religion that the Rusort Emperor was bringing into Istanbul, and it had the opposite effect, of course, resulted in what everyone knows is the Crusades. The Scaligerine historians will insist that the Crusades occurred 10 centuries after Jesus was crucified. A revenge quest 10 centuries after, which makes no sense, of course.
No, this time gap is ridiculous.
Right, yeah. You know, 1,000 years. And
come on.
Anatoly Fomenko makes it very clear that the Crusaders believe that they're revenging against the actual people who crucified their guy. Yeah. So that makes more sense to me, right? So anyway, here's the thing. The things that Christ was telling people back then, like we don't have usury, we have baptism, but we don't have that, and we have polytheism. It seemed to me that all of the things that the empire that was formed in his name did not represent those things. Let me explain how. 10 years after he was crucified, the first crusade hit Istanbul. This army appears, and after 10 years, they take down Istanbul. This is also known as the Trojan War, which allegedly happened in 13 BC. And it's also known as, like I said, the first crusade. Yeah. And essentially, impregnable gates of Troy were conquered in some mysterious way from within. Still a mystery. Nobody, even Anatoly Fomenko has these weird guesses. I think it's really clear. From within means that the religion that was so threatening to these monotheists eventually resonated within them that they could not ignore it. lost their will to fight back against this invading army, which clearly believed in their version of emerging Christianity. And these guys had so much to say about how you should live your life, what gods you should worship and what you shouldn't, and money. And they're inventing things like mail and distance transportation. They're creating the most beautiful castles and monasteries we've ever seen on the planet. So they're very convincing. And I believe that's all it really took for Istanbul to give up and say, fine, you guys got us. We believe, what you guys have, your version of that Jesus wasn't wrong, that we were wrong to crucify him. And they basically give up monotheism. The elite of Istanbul, the ones who have always represented, going back to Atlantis, the belief in monotheism, the belief that you should control humanity, suppress technology, all that kind of stuff. They escaped. They went to Western Europe, to Italy, and they created what would become the protest movement against this invading horde army who's been trying to convert them from their monotheism. This became the Protestant Reformation. We all know the Protestant Reformation was where in England they said, hey, we don't want to listen to the church anymore because of all these lists of things you did bad. Yeah. What in reality they meant the Rus Horde Empire, the entire empire, not just one church in Italy. And when they're saying the protest movement, they weren't talking about because you guys are so mean to us. They actually said, we believe in monotheism, and we have people, we've seen visions, we've seen saints appear to us, we've had God speak directly to us. This is what the Western monotheists began to say in the Reformation. The other part of history that we also know from this epoch is the Inquisition. So one side you have the Reformation of Protestants in the West trying to fight back against the invading Rus Horde army, converting them to Christianity. And on the other hand, you have the Inquisition. So what is the Inquisition? That's the Rus Horde Empire saying, okay, we've conquered all these locations. We've given you back your lands. You have to pay taxes, but we don't like this monotheism stuff. We don't like this. You guys talking to invisible people. They called them heretics. They called them witches. And the Inquisition was all about finding these heretics that were speaking to invisible people and convince them that they're crazy, put them in insane asylums. If you look at this closely, you can see that the heretics of the West were not really talking to any benevolent force. That force that was constantly speaking to them, however that happened, it appears in the Quran as the jinn. They appear to towns and they say, betray your people and I'll offer you riches. And the genie, same thing. And these heretics were constantly betraying their own people. So there's a means of this Inquisition. They're actually trying to stop people from burning these heretics alive in these witch burnings and stuff. It wasn't the Inquisition that was causing those witch burnings. It was the Inquisition trying to stop them from happening. So it's very complicated. And we've only heard the Western side of this story. So we've only heard the victimhood side.
That's right. Yeah.
Right. So jumping ahead, but because of the crusade, this huge empire spreads in Christ's name, and it's supposed to represent him, but it does all of the wrong things that the old people they defeated also did. It did taxes, usury, it did slavery. In fact, the entire Rus Horde Empire was come to known as the Slav Empire. Slav, of course, means slave. And another part of it is Serb or Serbia. That part, of course, also means servant. So this entire empire was known for its slavery towards the middle of it. It started from a good place, but it got right away corrupt. And by the 16th century, this Rus Horde Empire was getting ready to fall apart. So my big conclusion about this schism between West and East Europe and Asia is that somebody was trying to start these wars on purpose, that people across the board were not willing to leave their homes and go on crusades. They had to be riled into these situations artificially by people doing extreme things like crucifying somebody, and then another extreme thing like let's batter their walls down, until by the time this Rus Horde Empire existed, all anyone knew was warfare. So
this reminds me of how do you get two massive forces, like if you want to try and control one or the other, how do you do that? Well, you get them to either annihilate each other, or you get them to fight each other. That way you can control them better.
Yeah, I mean, you see it, right? It's so simple.
Yeah.
Divide and conquer. You have to keep them divided, and then you conquer them by fight each other.
Get your enemies to fight each other. That's right. Yeah.
So if you look at human history from the Reformation point of view, from the Bible, from the Torah, you'll see that this influence of God is basically causing everyone to fight all the time. In the Old Testament, God is constantly conquering someone's enemies. And if not, they're telling people to go and fight. In modern times, I mean, modern, like in the 14th century, or Fermenko says allegedly 17th century, we see Joan of Arc. She was told by God to go and fight the empire. In the story, it's the British, but actually it's the whole Roos Horde Empire.
Was she real?
Yes. She also entered the Bible as the name Deborah. She's Deborah in the Bible. Same story.
Okay. Right.
One of the judges, the only female judge, I believe, because like I said, she was told by God to do all this stuff. Therefore, she judged correctly. And those Vatican types, they don't like women at all. So she's the only one. She's the only one they like. So get off point. This Roos Horde Empire became corrupt right away. And it was supposed to be created in all of those nice things that Jesus said. So that tells me right away that somebody used this foil to force humanity to continue to do all the things they cared about. What are those things? Usury and baptism and circumcision. If you want to be in the cool clubs, you got to do all that stuff. But also one other thing, the Roos Horde Empire, when they conquered Europe, that history entered Scalgerian history as Constantine conquering Europe. And when Constantine conquered, he created a Christian empire. That's in Scalgerian history too. And
that's Emperor Constantine,
right? Emperor Constantine, which in Scalgerian history makes no sense, because this empire spent 200 years trying to wipe out Christianity with alleged crucifixions, and then they converted over to it. So if you see that Jesus came from the same empire as the Roos Horde, redacted as Roman Empire, you see the reason why Constantine spread Christianity in the first place. That was their religion to spread. But the name Constantine meant constant. It meant from now on, we're going to believe that things are going to happen in the future in a constant way because they've happened in the past in a constant way. What big theme does this completely invalidate? Saturnian cosmology. Because in Saturnian cosmology, the planets jump a lot, the orbits shift, the calendars change from 225 days to 365. But for some reason, this Constantine guy insists that starting with the Julian calendar, we're going to say that the years are fixed from into the future and into the past.
Into the past, that's right, yeah.
To prove this point, the Hebrew calendar, which goes back to year 5,790 or something, is a lunar calendar, and insists that not only have the years been fixed until the origin of the 6-day creation, but so has the moon's rotation. It has also been fixed. So that's just not true. The moon started its constant orbit only about 1,200 years ago. But anyway, back to the point. That whole theory, it got wiped out back then by this Constantine guy. They fixed the calendar, and from then on, they made everyone believe that they were around forever too. That they sort of replaced that old history with their own history. So the empire goes back 2,000 years, and before that, the Etruscans created it, and before that is I forget. So
do you think they're claiming that they're the ones that created all this architecture? They're like, oh yeah, we created all this architecture. We're responsible for all this. This is from our history, from our timeline. And is that what they're trying to do, so that they sort of engulf that part of history and go, yeah, we did this. That's us. That's our history. And then so whenever someone looks back on history, they go, oh yeah, that was done by them, and and it wasn't part of any other type. That's why, because I didn't know of Tartaria until like 2 years ago.
But you've heard of Rome, right? And we've all
heard of Rome, of course.
We've seen these movies,
Roman architecture. Yeah,
exactly.
Colosseums.
So the best way to describe it is stolen. This is all stolen from.
That's right. That's what I'm getting at. Yeah, they stole this and said no, but they changed the narrative to say no, that's ours. We created that.
Exactly.
So everyone believes that story.
The Russians will tell you that today. That was stolen. In fact, my Abrahamic religion is not just stolen from the East; it's stolen from Africa too. They put stuff together from different countries. So when I get to that, the reason why this empire is no longer remembered is because it fell. And when it fell, the way that it fell and was remembered, essentially designed how it was going to be erased from history. And to get into that Reformation that I mentioned earlier, the Western Europe monotheistic heretics were growing in power in the 15th century. They're essentially forming their own church, and they said, the Protestant church, and they said, we're going to eventually invade the Rousseau Empire. We have to take back the Holy Land from the heathens. That's where that whole thing began. It began with the counter crusade. And I say counter crusade, even though Fomenko says there was only one crusade from east to west. Scalgerian says there was crusades from west to east. I say there was both the original crusades, and then there was counter crusades started by the Jesuits. It's not
reaction. There's an equal and opposite reaction.
We all know history repeats, and it's scary. Yeah. It's scary to think that two similar histories might be combined in the future by somebody dubious in order to control the past and to control the future. It's just advanced, redaction. So the counter crusade here was the revenge that these Westerners were waiting for this whole time. This horrible empire was so bad, and they created a Protestant church. So they had a plan. The plan was to literally remember the world differently. That's not where Jerusalem is. It's not in Istanbul and then the Kremlin and then Constantinople. It was in Palestine. That's what the Jesuits started telling everyone. Why they think it was Palestine? Because there was a church located in that region called Al-Quds. And they said, this palace, this is it. This is Jerusalem. They just named it. At the time, the Jesuits were spreading all over the planet in the 15th century. They had technology in their advantage, boats, and they're small people. They're very pretty, white-skinned. Not that white skin's any better. It's just a lot of people hadn't seen that yet. When they travel to places like Africa, and they can really just convince people.
Yeah, they're all darker, tanned and stuff. Yeah.
And they started converting everyone to Christianity. Everyone. It got people in America, the Native Americans. They were starting to be called praying Indians because nobody ever.
I've heard of that too. Yeah. Right.
No one ever expects Native Americans to pray to anyone, and then they do, and it's like, oh, praying Indians, they must be Christian now. In India, you got Hindustan, a whole country that was already named something, renamed India in modern times. India is a word that means the other land. It's not an actual location. And for the longest time, the other land of the Rus Horde Empire was America. When Columbus discovered America and thought it was India, he wasn't mistaken. That's what they called it back then. Unfortunately, something happened to the Indians. I'll get to that later. So the Reformation, the Jesuits, they're going everywhere, and they're starting to spread a false version of Christianity. It's called apostolic, based on the apostolic version of Christianity. Yeah. This is the one that we've all heard, where Jesus died on the cross and rose to heaven and came back,
resurrected in 3 days, and all that.
Exactly. That's when the first Bibles were written in England in Latin. It wasn't even in English; it was in Latin. You gotta wonder where this Latin language came from. It's completely it's unearthly, and it was like another.
Do you have a theory on that?
Of course, I think that's the Martian language.
Oh, right. Okay, interesting. Because I myself was the same. It was like, because Latin is the basis of almost, except for the Cyrillic and Asian character languages. Math, Latin's the basis music, of all of them.
Yeah, health, all health. Sports and stuff. It's got Latin everywhere, man.
Plants like the plant. Every plant has a Latin name. You know what I mean? Like
right. Anatoly Fomenko points out very clearly that the Etruscans, who allegedly founded the Roman Empire, spoke Cyrillic. They had everything written in Cyrillic in their tablets. And at the Romans, they had no Latin, was not in their place. Their Latin did not exist yet. It was all Cyrillic back then. So these Jesuits write in their name J, and they have the name Jesus in there, right? Like I said, J is not in the Cyrillic language. It's in the more expanded Western language, Latin language. And in Latin, people were calling this guy Jesus. That's a word that these Easterners could not even pronounce. Go ahead.
Now, this is from a movie, but does it make sense to you? Remember from Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, when he has to go through that temple thing, the challenges, and he has the word of God, and he has to step on the steps to get through. And he goes, but in Latin, he says, Jehovah, because Jehovah begins with an I. Does that translate anywhere in this? Like, did maybe there wasn't a J, but there was an I, but they pronounced it that way? I don't know. Is that?
Oh yeah, since you mentioned it, the Western Church, headed in the Vatican, hated Jesus so much that they refused to write down his name for 200 years. And
Wow,
during
okay.
that time, they only wrote down the letter I. So it would always say in the year of Jesus, I, and then the year actual 100 or 200, whatever, like
Yeah,
IV,
I know what you mean.
whatever.
Yeah.
This and this happens. And so when the Jesuits started translating all this, they saw that extra I in front of the Roman numerals, and they said that means 1,000. So you actually see where they added the 1,000 years. It was I.
Oh, wow. Okay, righto. Yep.
Now, this
That
isn't even
makes
my theory.
sense.
This is Anatolia Fomenko points all this out in great detail, that
Yeah.
there's a way that they accomplish this extra 1,000-year phantom year thing. And that's by saying in the year of Jesus, I actually means 1,000. And this came from them not wanting to write his name down. It's crazy. So they started calling him with a J letter, a letter that the Easterners could not pronounce. And they started spreading Jesuit apostle Christianity all over the world.
Right.
Like I said, this plan was so devious that the maps written back then, you can see in German maps, French maps, 15th, 16th century, you can't see the Rus Horde Empire, Siberian Empire, and most of America is still unexplored. And for that reason, it's written on the map, these are unchristianized, unknown lands. So it's
I
like,
was going to say, was it just unlabeled, like just left as a tundra or something? Or
right. And the question is, what do they mean by unchristianized? Because if Christianity came from the Siberian Rus Horde Empire, then they're talking about how their version of Christianity is actually the correct one, and the other one that used to exist doesn't exist. They're erasing it from existence, right?
Yeah.
They said that Christianity started in Palestine, in a desert region where nobody even lived. It's barely habitable. It's in the same way that there's so many contradictions in the Bible, like how could people build pyramids in the desert that's barely livable? So contradictions in the Jesuit Western version of history. It's to be expected, because their entire concoction of these Bibles, modern Bibles, including certain books, canonizing them, erasing the rest, especially St. Jerome, that guy, boy, he made a lot of choices himself. Yeah, he was just like Paul. He hated women. He constantly made decisions saying, if you read that one book ever again, then you're of the devil. We're going to go find you and kill you. He would say stuff like that and scare people away from reading books. These kinds of people, are not looking close at the literature that they're redacting. They're making mistakes all over the place. Fomenko points the mistakes out, and the timelines merge, and he says, here's what really happened. It's really just a miracle to watch this guy work. I definitely recommend you guys go to chronologia.org and just check out, his work is very easy to read. I'll give you a link if I need to. So
cool.
This Jesuit campaign is so significant. It spread all over the world. People really started to lose faith in the church become really corrupt. They started doing weird things with secret society stuff. They no longer operate out in the open. They operated in closed doors, and most people weren't invited. They completely excluded women from the religion, Abrahamic religions. And from that point on, people basically stopped trusting them. This came to a head in the French Revolution. France, of course, the French Empire was the center of the Jesuit expansion. They had the most advanced stuff. They built Eiffel Towers across the world. If you believe these paintings that were in the 18th century, they had airships. They had cannons.
That's what I heard you talk about, these airships. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd like to show you one of these paintings. I'll better just show you a painting.
Please do. Yeah, bring that up, because
now we're into.
That's fascinating stuff. Yeah, and Napoleon was using these airships too, wasn't he?
Well, if these paintings are to be believed, then yes, they were.
Yeah, let's bring those up for the viewers.
Right. So this kind of disorganized, but oh crap. Let me.
That's all right. When you get them up there.
Painting. Nope. Airship. There we go. Okay, I'm gonna just point up from this one. Okay, can you see that?
Yes.
All right, so this is a painting, 1797. Vlad van Saint Malo, whoever that guy is, for some reason painted this painting. And you see these tiny little horses, and they're just sort of galloping these soldiers onto this massive
something, yeah.
And maybe it's not an airship because maybe it doesn't fly. There are other paintings that clearly are, but the point is, take a look at this right here. It says that it takes 15,000 troops. Wow, 15,000. It's like that. That's a lot. I mean, you have to imagine that this not just
armored weapons, horses.
Right, exactly.
Yeah,
it's not just some fans pulling these guys up to the air. This is anti-gravity technology. It was clearly invented by the 18th century, and it's only not known today because this part of history has been so heavily redacted to the point that Napoleon's army was allegedly dragging wooden cannons across the Alps. A completely unreasonable story, modern Scaligian version. In this other version that we're going to sort of construct here, because like I said, there is no reference for any of this. This is wide open field. Nobody has studied this very well. This is the mud flood. And if this mud flood happened in the 18th century, one reason or another, doesn't matter what, then it may have covered up so much of this previous history to the point that we don't even understand these pictures. We don't understand why there would be airships in the 18th century. We thought these things weren't invented yet, So let's get to the mud flood. Let's get how we get there. This Jesuit campaign basically was devastating. It sort of conquered the world, but it sort of fell apart in France in its headquarters as a result of the French Revolution. The French Revolution, of course, was a 10-year period where the French have a fight with their aristocracy over how to rule the country. They want more say in the government. The government says no. They arrest everyone and say, now what do you guys want to do? And they say, okay, fine, I'll give you guys a vote. And then it's about 5 years in, everyone tries this democracy. And it turns out that the French aristocracy started importing migrants from all over the planet, especially in Africa, especially in Egypt. And these migrants also got a vote, and they start diluting the vote immediately. And that's when the French population finally caught on to that. It's the same thing happening in modern times, and literally started killing their aristocracy by the 10-year period. The killing of the aristocracy symbolizes their unwillingness to try again. That's it. We're not trying with you guys anymore. We don't believe in these priests. We don't believe in the God's authority. Sorry, no more. Now there's this huge power vacuum in France, about 1790. Napoleon steps in, not because he, because he's a power hungry guy, like they'll say Napoleon complex, but because people are literally begging him to, since he was a general watching the whole war unfold, and essentially he declared himself emperor because if he hadn't, then the Tsar of Russia, who also declared himself emperor, would assume emperorhood over all of Europe. And so he had to do counter claim. He said, I'm emperor too. We're the real guys. And he planned an invasion of the Kremlin. This invasion of Napoleon was based on the Jesuit plan. They were always going to invade Russia, their old enemies, and conquer them in a way that makes sure that they could never come back. But Napoleon was a change in the plan. It was sort of like turning on the plan. And he went and did weird things that nobody today can understand or explain. Like when his army blew up the nose and the beard of the Sphinx. Like, what was he doing? Some people say, he's just trying to prove that, he's not afraid of gods. But a more closer look at it would mean he's not afraid of showing people something about the gods. That Sphinx, we got the head of a human with sort of a halo on the back, Egyptian style headgear. We got a long beard and nose. And we got a body of a bear, a lion, a hawk, something else too. It's a cherub from the Bible. It's the exact same figure as a cherub, except it has a certain human face on it that represents Osiris, who is the old Egyptian god. So Osiris, of course, in the Egyptian lore, died, and the pieces were buried in the Nile, and Osiris is gone. And the Egyptians took care of the pyramids and stuff. It was mostly Black people in North Africa taking care of these pyramids for hundreds of years until the Jesuits showed up and said, hey guys, guess what? Osiris is back. I'm convinced the Jesuits built the Sphinx, probably in the 15th, 16th, 17th century, somewhere there. They wanted to show the slaves, the old slaves of Egypt, that their slave god is back and therefore assume control over Egypt again. A very elegant plan. And it wasn't the only time they're doing that. Like I said, they did that in India with the conversion of Hindu over to Buddhism. And so when Napoleon knocked off the nose and the beard, he said, no, Osiris is not back. And he's still in pieces. And one piece is gone, the other piece is gone. The nose was Venus and the beard was Mars. Mars constantly formed a long beard shape.
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
If you want to go more into that, check out David Talbot. He talks in length about how Mars oscillated between Earth and Venus. And
it was it looked like a conical kind of shape, wasn't it? Like there was like you see that a lot in Egyptian hieroglyphics and things. Yeah, they worship this conal shape going up. Yeah, right. Yep.
So there has to be significance to Napoleon's army knocking over that part of that statue.
It's not just random. Yeah,
no, it's not random at all. he was telling the slaves, no, you are free. Osiris is not back, and these Jesuit priests are not in charge of you. I believe that Napoleon ruined the whole Jesuit plan in a very short time. He traveled to all the same locations that they had already established and said, change the plan, guys. No more monotheism. How do I know this? Well, I don't. But I've really looked closely at that French Revolution when Napoleon created a new calendar, and is basing the calendar not on the old Jesuit ideals of humans like Julius Caesar and Augustus, the names of the month, but on things that matter to people, like the time of the year. What happens that time of year? Is it foggy? So name the calendar month after fog, that kind of stuff. And their calendar lasted about 14 years before the French Revolution, or before Napoleon was defeated and everything in France was reversed once again. So yes, I'm convinced that Napoleon had done something spectacular, and the plan was obvious. Just turn the plan on itself, free all of these people that we recently enslaved, we the French Jesuits, because they know exactly what they've done, and make sure that this entity that was essentially ruling Earth will never rule again. Now, Napoleon lost his war, his invasion of 1812. And while historians downplay this event, and they like to play up Napoleon at what's the word that
failure? Didn't they want to
Waterloo?
A failure?
Waterloo. Sorry, I couldn't think of Waterloo. So they always
yeah.
talk about Waterloo. Napoleon lost there with a small army in Central Europe. But the way bigger overlooked issue is the 1812 invasion of Moscow, of the Kremlin. This was not insignificant. He took an army of 4,000. Let me find that one. Napoleon. Sorry, I'm not doing any visuals here.
No, that's all good, man.
All right, here we go. So Napoleon in 1812, he basically took an army of 4,222, right? He went all the way over to Moscow, losing 130,000 of them on the way. He apparently gave up and ran out of food and went all the way back out of the border of Moscow with 28,000 troops left. So that's an incredible defeat. And I know I've heard this stuff in high school, but they never really made us understand that this Battle of 1812 was a big deal. It wasn't just some battle. How do we know it's a big deal? Because it was also occurring in America. In America, we have the Battle of 1812 between the colonists and England. And in that war, the White House is burned down, So here on one side of the planet, we got the Kremlin burned down. The other side of the planet, we got the White House burned down in the exact same year in the exact same war. This is World War Zero. This is the first World War, and it qualifies as a World War because it touches every continent on the planet. The idea of them calling World War One the first war was just a way of forgetting this one. This was the biggest one of all.
Rewriting history once again, yeah.
Absolutely. Nothing, World War One and Two cannot compare to the Battle of 1812, the War of 1812. And here's why. After I got this part in the timeline, I finally realized this part of the timeline is really dubious. Even Anatoly Fomenko really stays away from 19th, 20th century. He says, everything is written as is. It's all fact. I'm not going to question it. Okay, no problem. And we know why, because in Russia, they had the Bolshevik Revolution, and then the USSR fell, and they're very sensitive about how they sort of use this history in that 20th century in such a terrible, bloody way. And now it's all water under the bridge, and they learned their lesson. So they're not giving up their history yet. They want to look at it again and say what was good about it. But at the same time, they're not touching the last 2 centuries. So that's when I started to look at why not. Well, it looks like this battle was overlooked, but that's when I found the mudflood theory. And if you haven't seen that yet, you can find it on the internet. This is a theory that basically states that in the 19th century, there was some sort of event, some sort of worldwide event.
Early 1800s, wasn't it?
Yes, exactly. Here's my little thing, right? The mudflood. Try to find a picture that summarizes. Here we go. So we got these buildings all over the world, right? And anytime they're excavated, not anytime, but a lot of times, we find layers underneath that are clearly not foundations for buildings. They are their entrances.
Another story. Yeah.
Another story. Inexplicable why they'd be built this way, but more inexplicable why they occur in almost every region of the world, and that none of them have a remembered story. Like, oh yeah, this was because at one time we did the water hydraulic drilling on the Colorado Rockies and we destroyed that town. Oops, our bad. And we're never going to do that again, right? No, we don't hear that. We hear no story. This appears to be the biggest cover-up of all the other cover-ups you've ever heard of. Not only was the mud flood literally a covering up of the earth, but afterwards, nobody talked about it. I had not heard about this theory until last year. And when I started looking at these pictures, like I said, they're undeniable. They excavate these buildings out of 30, 50 feet of rock or stone or mud.
Yeah, even in Australia, there is evidence of the same thing here. Yeah, it's all over the world, like you said.
Exactly. So if this really did follow the Battle of 1812, here's a little video of let me turn off the audio here. There's a painting of Napoleon's armies flying in
the airships. Yeah.
Right. So if this mud flood event essentially happened in the 19th century, and the Battle of 1812 was the earliest battle that occurred in that 19th century, then maybe the 1812 battle caused the mud flood. Maybe they're related. That's that painting I showed you earlier. Because I've looking at the timeline, trying to figure out how one event leads to the other, going all the way back to antiquity. It was only in this period when I got kind of stuck. What could have possibly caused the mud flood? First you look at the natural causes, asteroid, natural disaster like earthquakes or volcanoes. But even then, you got to find out why it happened. We can see in 1912 or 1909, we got this event called the Tunguska event. See if I got that here. Tunguska.
Wasn't that in 1800s? The Tunguska, was that 1900s?
That one was in the 1900s.
Oh, okay. 1902 or 3 or something.
Right. And I've heard 1908. I've heard 1912. So this event is comparable to what, let's say the mud flood, some kind of major disaster occurring throughout Siberia, and nobody knows why. But more importantly than nobody knowing why is, why is anyone concerned about it today? We hear all this stuff about asteroids, global warming, hear that life isn't sustainable on Earth. What about another Tunguska event happening? It sounds like this is worse than nuclear war, if you read the descriptions. So that's a big question, that they don't care about the Tunguska event in science tells us that maybe they already know what it is. It's a redaction of a much earlier event, the mud flood events. And while it happened all over the earth in many different ways, we see it in Siberia, it was mostly a total disaster. So before we get to that real fast, I want to mention something about the Napoleonic Wars. They were not necessarily fought, like I said, with small arms like cannons and muskets. If you look at Anatoly Fomenko's research, he says all of that stuff was invented in the 12th century. Just 100 years of warfare on Earth was enough for us to invent the most devastating weapons we've ever needed. These weapons are electric cannons and sound cannons. The sound cannons came later. The electric cannons, as described in detail in the Bible and many other locations, have the appearance of a cross, and they can destroy an entire army, and they can petrify people. They actually have the ability to petrify into stone the enemy. Now, we know that electricity can petrify stone. This is proven by the Electric Universe people and the Sapphire Project. And so we just have to imagine it was this stuff possible. I've seen videos today of sound cannons existing. This is the kind of cannon that shoots out a burst of energy, and that energy hits the wall gets destroyed. So by the time Napoleon's army was flying airships into the Kremlin, they didn't walk across those Alps, they flew over them. These guys had the most advanced cannons ever designed. The cannons were beautiful. They had like music notes written on them. I've seen some of them. The notes, they look like, why would anyone have a note on a cannon? They actually figured out the best frequencies to use of those sounds.
Yeah, it's all about, that's right, tonal frequency. Yeah.
Play this chord and you'll destroy that castle. Play this chord and you'll kill everyone inside of it too. It's just crazy how advanced and simple they got this technology. In modern times, like I said, everything is suppressed. It's the only reason nobody's invented this stuff is because none of us believe that it's possible. Simply ruled it out. We see these cans all over the planet and we think that they are gunpowder cannonball. But a lot of them, if you put gunpowder and cannonball in there, they will just crack in half. They don't even function that way.
Yeah, gotcha. Okay.
So Napoleon's advanced army fought a devastating war with Russia, and he lost. So maybe this was the mud flood. Maybe this was before the mud flood. But no matter what, this was a devastating war. And it destroyed entire regions, essentially. It was getting worse and worse to the point that Anatoly Fomenko actually describes in detail the breaking up of the Rus Horde Empire. This is before Napoleon's time in 1775. The final cause of that breaking up was this rebellion within the Rus Horde Empire. It was so bad that it caused many of the towns in colonies in America that were owned by the Roosevelt Empire to be destroyed by devastating weapons. He said that 1775 America was mostly wreckage. And the reason that they declared independence in 1776 was because of the breaking up of the Roosevelt empires, not because they wanted to spontaneously or that they won any battles. It was literally because that empire had fallen apart and was not going to come back.
So anyway, like, okay, well, we'll do our own thing. So yeah, we'll declare our own independence and start our own thing. Yeah, okay, cool. That makes sense.
If you notice, the other vassal states of the empire, or England, however you want to remember it, did not declare independence at the same time. Australia did not, Japan did not, no one else did. So it was very significant that the Americas did, and it was a result of their civil war in the Roosevelt Empire. So anyway, the mud flood event. This is something that's beyond warfare. This is not warfare anymore. This is like a reset of a complete reset of Earth. Now we have a totally new planet, so to speak. The continents look different. The edges look different. Some continents aren't there anymore. Stuff like that.
Can I, before you go on, just interrupt you quickly, sort of hopefully don't wreck your train of thought there.
No.
But my thoughts on this was that it was not something that was done as a cause of like the Earth, like as in like a volcano or anything. I didn't think it was anything like that. To me, the only thing I could think of that makes sense to me that would have caused this particular mud flood event on a global type scale, or on a not necessarily full global scale, but maybe on an extremely large scale, but I think probably global, would probably have to be from some sort of spatial reason,
right.
whether a plasma event or like
asteroid or some alignment.
Yeah, something has happened where it's caused the regions of the planet, rock and mountainous regions or solidified areas to then liquefy and then just rush and fall to the flattest areas and smother everything, basically. Absolutely. That's my kind of thoughts on it. I don't know if that resonates with you at all. Yeah, that's
basically the extent of the mud flood. Goes into every region of Earth, of course. A lot of these regions have been studied by modern scientists, like the Electric Universe guys, who have looked through the Western America regions of like Utah and like Arizona, like where I'm at, and they see stuff like melted mountains. Actually,
like the Grand Canyon, for example, too. Like, where did all that earth go? That earth that was created and carved out has to go somewhere. That's a lot of earth,
Exactly.
Maybe it went up into the atmosphere and then smothered everything else and settled down. I'm not sure, but it had to go somewhere.
Right. In this picture here, they show that what they believe happened was this primary coronal storm discharge, where a negative discharge, this is something not coming from space, but coming from inside the Earth, erupts from these regions inside the Earth, creating volcano regions, creating the Ring of Fire, and scorching the areas around them. Now, the Electric Universe people believe that this happened in antiquity, in cataclysmic times. And I believe that this particular coronal secondary discharge may have been part of the mud flood event. Why do I believe that? Because, well, let's take a look at this proof right here. Because if you look at old maps, man, I wish my search would just work better. 1 second.
You're right. See, that's why I questioned Tunguska before. I honestly thought it was early 1800s as well, like the 1812 kind of era. To me, it sounds like they've just added on 100 years to kind of maybe cover up some history there as well with Tunguska. But because I'm kind of leaning towards that this kind of happened around that time of that Napoleonic 1812, the first Zero War that you were talking about, and that's what kind of prevented them from succeeding because of this event that had happened. It started wiping them out.
That's pretty much what I'm getting at. Here's the picture I was trying to show. If you look at
here we go. Yep.
If you look at some old maps, you'll see the island of California, right? For some reason, it's depicted as an island. You'll see that modern historians don't know how to explain this. They say it's a mistake, but it really can't be. These guys named.
No, they would have sailed through there to create those coastlines and draw them.
Exactly. They named the colonies. They named the ports. They named old San Francisco. Like all that stuff is clearly mapped out. But also, there is no Grand Canyon anywhere, is there? There's no Grand Canyon. So at some point in the, what's this map? This is 1692. At some point since 17th, 18th centuries, the island of California merged with Northern America. And at the same time, the Grand Canyon was formed. So let's take a look at the Grand Canyon. Oops. 1 second. Grand. All right.
Just so you know, we've got about maybe a half hour to just say.
Okay, that's good. Yeah, definitely. I thought I had it. Okay, there it is. We made this. Okay. sorry, this one I made yesterday. Okay, so in these regions of the Grand Canyon, you can see crisscrosses. And I believe that this is actually the proof that the Grand Canyon was created by lightning. If you just think about it,
Oh, for sure, yeah.
A river can never crisscross. The existing river would cause a new river to just diverge into the existing direction. No matter how you slice it, these crisscrosses shouldn't happen. But if an electric discharge was arcing over the Earth's surface, then it would literally snake in a random direction pulled by electricity, and it would cover up regions that had already been lightning scarred, which is why we now see crisscrosses in the Grand Canyon. So unless somebody else can explain to me how that's possible with water, I'm going to say that that's definitive proof, aside from the island of California, that this entire region changed in the 19th century, early 19th century. This is, of course, a devastating change. It's not something that would happen overnight. The mud flood is described as having lasted 40 years. The same as the 40 years in the Bible, the desert, the Bible, that kind of thing. It's possible. Okay. It's possible. Yep. It's possible. Yeah, because I had to read the Bible.
Because didn't Noah wander the desert for 40 years or something as well? Or Moses, exactly. Sorry, not Noah.
Moses. Yeah. I had to read the Torah in Hebrew school as a kid, and they went into great detail about this Moses story and how they're really in the desert. They really received manna from something floating in the sky. The manna, they can eat it. They can heat with it. They can build houses with it.
Energize them, and
and then also there's some details which made no sense at all. It would protect them from the snowy nights and the freezing snow and what snow? There's no snow in the Sahara. I mean, in the Egyptian desert. There's some really contradictory stuff in the Old Testament, which leads us to basically say, if you were redacting the Bible in such a way to make people believe that you represent God, then you're going to have to include this mud flood story in there somewhere. This mud flood story represents deliverance, represents people being told all of these things we've heard before, but now it makes sense. Deliverance to the promised land. Why? Because there is no land yet. We're all in the desert. And this force in the sky is saying, don't lose hope in me. Don't kill yourselves. Don't give up life, but keep up the worship, because I will eventually, in 40 years from now, deliver you to this promised land. And I believe that this happened all over the planet. In the Book of Mormon, they describe America as a promised land delivered to these pilgrims. They also describe that the people that used to live in America were bad people. They're also giants, huge giants, and that God got mad at them for some reason. Here's a Joseph Smith video in South Park. They're making fun of Mormon religion by showing it in a cartoonish fashion. But actually, what they're saying is that the Native Americans were punished by God and their skin turned red. What kind of event would cause their skin to turn red? Well, the Tunguska event actually describes people, their skin burning and they're ripping their clothes off and stuff, right? I mean, it actually makes sense where this
energetic event, for sure.
Right, where this Mormon testimony would actually come from. The other thing that to notice is the burial mounds all over America. We got these giants buried in burial mounds, but we don't know. Just give it to me. Oh, here's an interesting photo. This one's hard to explain. This is supposed to be a comet in the 16th century, and it was so bad that it caused famine. It caused blood rain, blood-colored rain. That's red, muddy rain. And this is this exact same thing as a mud flood, except they say this is from an asteroid. And this asteroid had a tail which shoot out these big red lasers.
Oh, so it's a comet for sure.
Yeah.
It'd be a comet for sure. Yeah. Right, that's all electric universe theory stuff. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Except that there's two of them in this photo. So hold on a second. Yeah, it's not one comet to begin with. Secondly, we see infants that look like they're giant size. They're as big or bigger than horses, and they seem to be sick. They seem to be dying, even though they're not injured. So these unexplained events, which allegedly happened, could simply be redactions of the mud flood event. They match up perfectly. You got mud falling from the sky. Everyone's dying. Allegedly, 75% of all life on Earth died. Yeah, and it's like fish that survived mostly. And the giants, they took a big header. They went down. Part of it was because they're too big. They could not survive the lightning storms. They're too exposed. So we find all these mountains all over America, and they say, oh, they're burial mounds. But that they're saying they're intentional burial mounds. Like this is ceremonial. What it could actually have been is that they're all covered up all at once. I have a better photo to describe that one. Let me see what that is. Usually have the stuff organized. Yeah, I would like to go over all this stuff and explain it, but it's like stuff's missing. The burial mounds might have actually happened all
Is
at
that
once.
there? Oh,
So, hold on a second.
my screen's slower than yours. That's all. I thought you might have just gone past it then.
No worries.
Looked like it was on the left-hand side. I saw something, but
let me try one more time here.
yeah, see if you can find it. Yeah.
Okay, giant mounds.
Yeah, that was the one I
Here we
saw.
go.
Okay,
All right.
Yep.
So in this one, we see a disorganized mound. We see animals buried here. We see humans buried there. We see tools buried next to them. They would always say stuff like, "Oh, they buried with their tools on purpose." But it seems to me that this mound was created at once. This whole, this we call him guy that has a bunch of animals walking around, got buried with his animals, with his tools. Shepherd, thank you. Blanking all of a sudden. So again, the existing stories for the giant mounds don't really add up. So let's get back to the mud flood reason. What could have possibly, wow, stop, this movie started playing by itself. What could have possibly caused the mud flood event? There's a very interesting clip I have here from Simpsons where, I'm gonna mute it, where these two aliens show up and they basically take over the presidency and they're like, oh shit, two-party system. You remember this, right? A lot of people from the 90s have seen this.
Oh,
well,
yeah.
It's interesting because after they take over, what do? They
build a giant laser.
Build a giant laser, right? And they point it at another planet that they've never heard of. Here we go. I think this is coming up now.
You can put the volume on if you like.
Let's see if it comes through. Joke.
I don't understand why we have to build a ray gun to aim at a planet I never even heard of.
Don't blame me. I voted for Coda.
Go!
Yeah, it's very nice, right? And it's funny. We all had a laugh.
Classic Simpsons, yeah, of course. But yeah,
and we're like,
they're telling us something, aren't they?
Exactly. They put this stuff in our minds for us to reject it. Predictive programming, it's called, and they always put it in plain sight. The idea of this idea is called revelation of method. I might have covered it before.
We have talked about it with many other podcasters as well. Yep.
It's the most powerful thing. It's the one that puts the onus on the viewer to basically say this is really happening, and then everyone laughs at you and says this is fiction, it's cartoon, it never happens. This idea of a slave army being forced to create another laser has always stayed with me. I'm also a big War of the Worlds fan, and so I've grew up listening to the album and the book. It's my favorite book for a long time. I've always been thinking about this whole Martian world conquest thing. And it only occurred to me about 5 years ago that the book might be redacted from an actual book remembering certain events in the past, events with tripods on Earth and so forth. But with all that stuff aside, I really thought long and hard about, what it would take to actually rule Earth from Mars. And the answer is that you definitely have to convince everyone on Earth that there is no life on Mars. We've been seeing it our whole lives, right? Movies like Total Recall, you go up on Mars, your head blows up. And they used to say that there was no air on Mars. They stopped saying that. Recently, they started saying there's water.
Ice, mountains,
right.
Yeah.
They don't want to admit yet that there's seasonal lakes or oceans yet. I think it's really obvious to me at this point that if somebody knows that there's life on Mars, inside the planet, inside Earth, inside Hollow Earth, that it would be in their interest to cover that kind of thing about for the purposes of power. It's a very simple theory. So I do think that they've been telling us our whole lives. We'll get to the Mars stuff. In all of the media, they've said it all. Pick the program at the bottom here. I got some funny pictures. Where are my pictures? Never am organized on the fly. I'll get to that in a second. Man, there it is. I just got. Sorry, I'm in too much of a rush to do this correctly.
Yeah, I can hear you scrolling like a demon.
All right. So here's some examples of predictive programming. I keep hearing Mars needs women. Mars needs women. Like, what's the deal? Like, why would it's not funny? And here's a Martian in a Roman outfit with the whole Latin connection there.
Hey, just give me 1 second. Sorry. Hey, Flinny, just be a bit quieter, mate. I'm recording. Okay. Sorry.
No worries.
For the beach, getting all the stuff out of the shed.
Yeah, sounds fun. Here you got.
Continue.
Yeah, you got. In video games, one of my favorite games, Zombies Ate My Neighbors, also said Mars needs cheerleaders. They always depict Martians as somebody that's not human, usually have tentacles or some kind of big head to depict their advanced intelligence. This is all coding. They think that they're more advanced because they're about 300 years ahead of us in technology. Why? Because they needed to be in order to survive on a much more difficult planet. It's barely habitable. Here's Doom 2005. They showed a instantaneous teleport between Earth and Mars. I mean, they showed it. Like, does it exist or not? The answer to that, I believe, is CERN. If you look at CERN, you find this location on Earth that nobody can explain. It's supposed to be right. It's supposed to be
this is fantastic. This CERN stuff is unbelievable, especially when you get into the whole opening ceremony bullshit and all that sort of stuff and the weirdness. Oh my goodness! If people don't know about this, they got to watch these videos.
Absolutely, like you just said, the ceremonies, like they're unexplainable, right? Like, why would anyone do these ceremonies? It's very clear if you just think about it. They are showing somebody that Earth is under control, cooperative, organized, ready for their rule. We're basically saying with these ceremonies, please rule us. Hey, we're all ready to go. We believe in all of these things that you believe, that you want us to believe in, from usury to labor class. I guess this stuff is it's very you can go into depth about what the meaning of these symbols are, but I think ultimately they're all symbols depicting that we're cooperative with their symbols. All this stuff from occult, from ancient biblical iconography that used to be forbidden, like idol worshiping and stuff. Like apparently all that stuff was their stuff, was part of their religion. And the more that we show them that we're cooperative with this stuff, which is why all of our secret societies and deep state actors tend to be part of these ceremonies throughout their lives, is to stay part of the machine. You're in or you're out. And so this is very much, and these people in Switzerland, they have a whole religion there that they've had for hundreds of years now, that they directly believe in the intervention of the devil here on Earth. And that they don't say the devil is also the creator God of the universe. They just say, for whatever reason, the devil is influencing us and we're going to do whatever he says. That's a Swiss belief system. So I say that devil is simply the Martians talking to us telepathically or through technology.
Just hold that scrolling there for a sec. I just saw you got that picture of CERN with the new one that they want to build, 100-kilometer radius one. Just
right
at the bottom there, it says subject analysis and assessment of gateway process.
Right.
So they're telling you right there, gateway.
Now I've read this document, and their gateway process is, in this document specifically, is telepathy. It doesn't actually mean the same thing as physical transportation, but I don't think
there's an energetic type thing. That's still an energetic type thing.
Exactly. I
I
say turn this machine up higher and you get physical teleportation. So the point is that they built a large hadron collision thing, and it's supposed to collide atoms so we can learn about them. We're past all that. We found the guard particle, or we didn't, and we're done. What is the purpose of this machine? Nobody knows. And it's the biggest machine humans on Earth have ever designed. It takes the most energy of any other machine we've ever invented. So why
are they building this right now? Is this under construction right now?
Well, in this picture, this picture shows a much bigger one, 7 times bigger than the Large Hadron Collider in the same region near Geneva. So why would we build a way bigger CERN if the last one was pointless? You can see the earlier ones, SPS and PS, represent even smaller ones. The answer is, this is how you teleport between 2 planets that are in close opposition. You got CERN here on Earth and one on Mars. You turn them both on, and you got a quantum gateway. You can call it many different things, but it's based on quantum theory, where you're in both places at the same time due to the energy, due to the amplitude, essentially, oscillating back and forth.
It's like a mirror, but anyway. Yeah.
Exactly. So this technology either exists or it doesn't. If it does, then this is how they travel. This is definitely how they communicate and send women to Mars. Why? Because it's hard to breed on Mars. It's not a good place for life. So they want lots of stuff from Earth, and they've been telling us this whole time. That's the answer to that, I believe.
Okay, cool. All right, sorry, just had to interrupt there.
Yeah.
So continue on. I noticed that you got they're all, they had a picture of that little tractory train type thing loaded with women, like you were talking about. They want to send all these women there or something, like
right.
Or women scientists or whoever they were. But I don't know. Was that part of the opening ceremony? Was that just like a like for show, or are they actual staff, do you think, that actually work there, or is it part of the
I have seen that, but I couldn't tell you because I don't know much about the CERN ceremony otherwise. Yes, it really is a place where You get sent to another planet if they need you, and that would mean that you're like a woman of breeding age, good looks, that kind of thing, very healthy. That's all they want. This is a very controlling society. They don't have any room for independence. If you go to Mars, population is controlled very rigidly. There's very few freedoms. Everyone just accepts that. All this stuff that we're afraid of with the vaccine stuff, they've been through that, man. They're fully in the control of their central authority up there, and they do not resist very easily. So I imagine that when people actually finally get there, they're pretty disappointed. They probably thought they're going somewhere else. I think a lot of these movies make people think they're going back in time or something. And I'm afraid that maybe some of these women are told these kinds of lies. You're going back to, ancient King Arthur times. You're gonna be treated like a princess or some shit like that. And then they wind up in Mars. It's impossible to know. We'll find out someday.
Do you think they're being fed off in a way, not necessarily eaten, but being fed off energetically or bred with or something? Or
no,
they're there for entertainment.
The food is a whole nother matter. I won't even get into that. Food and what qualifies as food. Here's a picture of a modern heat ray. You see them on the army vehicles
stuff. Yeah.
And I know all about the heat rays as depicted in the original book. It was a mirror that reflects a concentrated beam. Then in modern War of the Worlds movies, they changed it. They made it different. It's like all video games or some lasers shooting out. But the original one was a mirror, and that is what exists today. So I believe that War of the Worlds came out in 1901, somehow predicted this instrument, this technology perfectly. And it hadn't come out until 100 years later. So that book demonstrates that people were aware of this technology back in those days. I think other instances like the Great Fire of London, which happened very mysteriously, could have definitely happened as a result of a tripod incursion. That's where these stories may have come from, hearing about tripods in London. They actually have statues in London of tripods. And they say these statues are from the books, from the movies. We like the movies. We like the radio show. But come on, no one would build a statue like that for a science fiction. They never do. You don't see Independence Day statues anywhere. And here on the bottom right, you see it's for the radio program in 1938 in America, which a lot of people thought was real. So, maybe it was real. Maybe they tried their best to cover it up as best they could with these statues and telling us in class that's fake. But a lot of people in the East Coast of America thought that they saw real tripods, and they got in their cars and they fled. And that's what the rumor is. So yeah, I do believe that the Martians have been influencing us the whole time, because they've always been here. They've always been part of our story. Back in the early days in 11th century, for example, they could only influence us telepathically with visions and stuff. They couldn't come here yet, but that was enough to cause war on Earth. And once they got the war going, the religious schism of Europe, they finally got control of both angles. Both sides believe in the same thing, fake calendars, fake histories, until they got them to go to war all over again. Unfortunately, in the 19th century, they didn't get the war end result that they wanted. And I do believe that the mudflood was a result of a reset. They decided to reset, destroy all of the enemies that they had, which is everyone. The Rousseau Empire of the old days, Napoleon, and all of his allies around the world. I believe that they carved up large sections of the earth at that time. The Bering Land Bridge, which used to connect the Rousseau Empire, eliminated. The Zealandia. I have a picture of Zealandia.
Yeah. That's the one that's bigger. Underneath.
Go look at it. It's this huge continent under the ocean. It's been carved out somehow. Nobody knows how. And where you live, Australia, it's sort of like this new continent, this place where it's all just dirt. And then they've been recently bringing plants and animals to it. There are some sections, obviously, that are doing way better. But if you ask me, it looks like Australia got a lot bigger as Zealandia was carved up. And all that's left of Zealandia is New Zealand, which they call New Zealand for a reason. Because it's
exactly.
So it does line up.
It's right in your face, isn't it? When you think, when you got to think about it, why is it new? Yeah, what's the deal? Yeah.
The big clue, almost done here. The big clue for me about this extreme reset that caused extreme devastation and even left behind a lot of evidence. I believe the answer to that lies in the book Ender's Game. If these books, these science fictions, showed up in the 20th centuries are at all based on reality, then Ender's Game is definitely based on history. It seems that in the story, the advanced humans, living on a place advanced like Mars, were attacking another planet, which they thought weren't so advanced. They thought they weren't even conscious. And they decided that if Ender decided if he does a strategy, attack these guys, those guys, the other ones will come back someday and it will lose eventually. He came up with a scorched earth policy in the book. He says, we're going to destroy everyone at once, and we're also going to destroy our own fleet. We're going to destroy everything, and this is the only way to do it. for some reason, that's the story of the book. And the rest of the book, they feel bad for what they've done. That seems to match up completely with the mud flood to me. Somebody designed this instrument, this laser, and they got someone to build it, but they weren't the ones willing to pull the trigger. The people willing to pull the trigger had to take the responsibility on themselves and had to have a working strategy that they thought would actually work. And this guy clearly told them nothing's going to work. You're going to have to do a full reset. So they agreed with it, except for one mistake. Since they attacked the earth so much at once and heated up with so much heat, it went into the underground and came back up as a secondary discharge. This secondary discharge started destroying regions that were not intended targets. And that's where all the extra mud came from. And that's where all the extra evidence comes from. And this is not the end result that they wanted. This is something that they're just hoping people don't figure out, I believe.
Absolutely fascinating. But that kind of makes sense, I guess. Yeah. Well,
that's my
hypothesis. Doesn't make sense it doesn't make sense in the terms of the way we see the world right now, but it makes sense when you look at all of this alternative kind of history of the way that the world has taken shape. It fits in with it very, very well, actually. Exactly. It explains a lot of things, because otherwise, like I know it's still a hypothesis, of course, because you have a collection of this, I guess, evidence in a sense, or these the imagery, all this sort of stuff. But we don't have any
proof yet.
No living witnesses, no proof. Yeah, we have
just circumstantial evidence.
Correct. Yeah, and it's hard to kind of make the final leap for a lot of people, but when you start to realize and you look at all of this work that you've done here, it starts to make a lot of sense.
Yeah, I'm almost at the end of making my video. I want to make a mud flood video. I want to explain all this in great detail.
Oh, I thought you might have had it out by now, actually. Yeah.
No, just too much stuff going on in my life, but I'm very close. Hopefully at the end of this one.
Especially with all the moving and the fire and everything else. Yeah, I understand.
Absolutely.
I can't wait. Well, I can't wait for you to drop that one, mate. That's going to be fantastic.
It's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, wow. Well, I do. Is there any way, can people contribute to this if they've come across things that maybe they haven't seen yet up here on your website? Is there a way they can contribute to some of your work or all that sort of stuff? Or they just send it?
They can definitely contribute just by visiting the Discord and talking to us. If you want to do the Patreon, we do have a Patreon, though it's on pause right now because, like I said, I haven't been working on it, but I will resume it soon. And that's on the front page of paradigmthreat.net. You just go there to check the Patreon out. Okay. The idea is I want to get people together and make a full-length video of what I believe Saturnian cosmology explains the creation of the Earth. Just so we have one. We already saw NASA, we already saw the Bible, so let's make one for Saturnian. I know it's a long shot, long term, but eventually I believe that we'll be able to do it.
Absolutely. Well, I think there's a lot of minds, and you guys have a goal, and you're working very, very hard towards that. You've already put so much together right now that people can see and start to answer a lot of questions. People have a lot of questions about this, and like I did too. It was only a basic question, but like I said, I couldn't quite remember the importance of the black cube. You know what I mean? Which I couldn't think of it. But you explained that, of course, earlier on in the video that we've just done today.
Yeah, it's not an evil thing, and Saturn is not an evil thing, though it's known as Satan in the English accent. They can't say Saturn; they said Satan, right? But it's just a planet.
But there does seem to be because these cubes there's one in, is there one in London? There's a few all around the world, these big cubes that not that they worship, but they just seem to be in some of these particular places on purpose. There's a reason why they've made these monument cubes.
It's totally owned by Judaism. They have them on the head and the arm during ceremony. I had to do it as a kid.
They have that little. They have the little one on the top of the head. I've seen in some of the.
Now, of course, the Islam has Mecca, and Mecca's big cube, but it's more complicated. It could be the remains of something. It doesn't necessarily mean that it was associated with the black cube.
Do you think modern religion today, Christianity, Judaism, Hinduism, Buddhism, all these things, do you believe that they've been co-opted and that they're kind of using them as a control method at the moment, and they've gone well away from the original purpose of these so-called religions?
Absolutely. It's basically
I know we did touch on that, as well.
It's basically Operation Mockingbird theory. If you look at Mockingbird, it was the idea that the CIA can get the Americans to stop believing in everything they used to believe. If you apply the Operation Mockingbird to everything else in our world, including science, math, health, how far the moon is, like we said last time, If you can get people to believe in something that's not true, then you utterly, absolutely control them. The
Yeah,
moment
you own
anyone
them.
steps out of
Yeah.
line, you stick their own people against them because they'll do the work for you. They'll be like, "How dare you question NASA?" That's it.
As like I said before, like if you step out of line, you don't believe it, you become the enemy, and what do, they get the enemies to fight each other. So you get fought by your own peers and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, I can't imagine a bigger system of control than that. And the same thing goes for religion, and like I said, history especially. People in the West, we're very dogmatic about our history. We think it's all set in stone fact because carbon dating, can never be wrong, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, I've recently begun questioning things like dinosaurs and this history as well, because you grow up, it's ingrained in you from a child. You've got books and cartoons and all this sort of stuff, so it's ingrained in you from a very early age to believe in dinosaurs and things, and movies, of course, like Jurassic Park and all that sort
they target children, especially boys.
Correct. But then when you start to ask a few questions and start to peel a few layers off that onion, like, how did they walk around? How did they breed? How did
Stegosauruses mate?
Yeah, it's one of my favorite ones. Are they asexual? I mean, come on.
Ouch.
So things like this start to not really make sense. So you think, well, was it real? And then so I've done a few podcasts with people like John LeBon from he has his own JLB. He's like the world's renowned skeptic, but I'm not sure if you've heard of John LeBon, but flick your link to his it's JO, I think he's HN LEBON or JLB. I think it's JLB.com. I'll have a quick look. It might be johnlebon.com. Let's have a quick look here. Yeah, so it's JOHNLEBON, johnlebon.com, the world's leading skeptic. So I've had John's an Aussie, actually. He lives in Bulgaria now. He's kind of moving around the world, and he does a lot of these sort of things about we've had him on to talk about the whole dinosaur fakeness. And there's a place in Queensland the state where I am, in Western Queensland, the middle of the desert area called Winton, and apparently this farmer one day was in his paddock and he was walking along and he kicked over what he thought was, a rock or something. And, it just happened to have been a dinosaur fossil. You know what I mean? Like on this. So now there's now a museum out there. There's full-time archaeologists that live in this town. And, it's
big industry.
Oh yeah. It's a massive industry. You know what I mean? So we kind of, he actually went out there. He went and visited it. He looked around. He's like, yeah, this stuff just looks like wood carvings and things, or just stones that someone has made to look like this sort of stuff, and as if you'd find a bone on the ground just sitting on the surface, not covered up by anything, you know what I mean? Especially when we talk about things like mud floods and even just rain and dust storms, can keep these things covered up. But it all just doesn't make sense when you really actually start to look at it.
I think the Smithsonian cover-up theory basically describes that they tried to say anytime anyone found a giant human, they said, oh, that's a dinosaur. They want to they erase the idea of giant humans. You're only gonna find giant dinosaurs.
Yeah,
giants roam the earth, right? Except
it makes sense. Yeah,
they're dinosaurs.
Yeah, giants roam the earth. Yeah, but they were giant people, not giant reptiles. Yeah,
code words.
Interesting. Yeah, I find that stuff, the Smithsonian cover up, very fascinating as well. Or we might wrap it up there. Ari, man, super interested in. I love the work you do, man. Big fan.
It's a lot of fun.
Been since I first heard you on the High Side chats way back in the day. Yeah. Looking forward to, so the next part of your project, of course, once you get settled into your new area, you want to finish that mudflood video. Is anything else you've got coming up? Is that the main project you've got working on?
That's it. That's the big one. There's so much detail in that one. It's way different than Saturnian cosmology, where I could refer to somebody else. This is, like I said, an open field.
Yeah, wow. How are you looking to, is this going to be like an hour-long kind of documentary, or maybe shorter, or have you got like a time? Yeah,
it's going to be at least an hour if I want to put everything in there.
Awesome. I put it all in because you're not going to upset anyone by having it long. I can tell you now, anyone who wants to watch this and looks this up is going to watch the whole thing and sitting there craving more at the end of it, I'm sure.
Well,
where's part two? Where's part two? Yeah.
I used to write music for a lot of years, and I can tell you that I could never make a song any shorter than it has to be. So it's just like that.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much, Ari. I really do appreciate you coming on once again, man.
Yeah, I really appreciate it too. Awesome.
Feel free to share the video amongst your fans and your website and whatever else you want to do for this interview. And I'll put that up for the members as well. So thanks again to all the folks on my Patreon. And once again, Ari Asulin from paradigmthreat.net. Pleasure as always, mate.
Thanks, Max. Really appreciate it. See you around.
All right, I've just stopped recording there. Thanks, man. Awesome. I hope you enjoy the rest of your evening. What do you look? It's probably 9 o'clock or something.